Super excited to be here today with our special guest, Ami Kunimura. And of course, we are in the midst of our 14-day morning routine challenge, which is all about self care, self love. And I don't think we can find a better person to talk to than Ami. Ami is the founder of the Self Care Institute. She's a writer, speaker, music therapist, and also has a PhD. So she definitely knows what she's talking about. She is from the beautiful state of Hawaii, but also spends her time in California. And what really piqued my interest, Ami, on your website and your profile is you talk about burnout
Yeah.
and you talk about professionals. I think that's a great place to start. Why is it? Is it a big problem? Is it a problem now more than it was before? What's going on in our professional lives these days?
Yeah. So the answer to all that is yes. It is a bigger problem than before, especially since 2020. Burnout has
Mm,
increased. And burnout is a global issue. It's also a societal issue, or it doesn't just manifest in individuals, but it does impact all of society. So burnout's not just impacting, professionals and our own health, but it impacts our healthcare systems, it impacts our economy, but also our day to day life and our families and our communities also. But it is a very serious issue, not just because it's affecting our health, but it's impacting our way of life and our decision making.
I mean, how did we end up here? How do we get things so wrong?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so I think to answer that question, it might help to take a look at the word burnout and see what this even means to see what is actually wrong. So, research has shown that, the word burnout can be used in three different ways. And now, first of all, the word burnout can be thrown around a lot. Like it doesn't just
Yeah.
mean we're tired or, having a bad day, but burnout is this prolonged experience of exhaustion. But when we're using it three ways, first, we're looking at burnout as a state of being. So if someone's saying, like, I'm burnt out right now, it can mean that they're in this state of burnout where they're going from exhaustion to depletion as far as this like increase of fatigue that they're feeling in their life. So that state of being, someone saying, I'm burnt out, it can mean they're feeling really exhausted, depleted of energy, having a change in relationship to their own work, and maybe not feeling like they're accomplishing as much as they could at work. So that state of burnout is the
Yeah.
way the word burnout's most commonly used. But burnout can also be a verb where it's like if someone says, I'm burning out right now,
Mm,
that means burnout can also be a process. So it can be this process of someone going from, this certain level of
ouch.
functioning to like decreasing in their ability to be effective at work or feeling energized at work. And then lastly, the third way burnout can show up is that burnout itself can be a symptom of a bigger problem. So burnout can be like a symptom of, a bigger personal issue or professional issue or workplace issue or societal issue too. So in these
Yeah.
three ways, burnout can be a state, it can be this process of losing energy, but it can also be a symptom of something bigger. And I think that sort of answers your question of like, why is this happening and how did this all come to be? Is that burnout is showing up as a symptom
Yeah.
of things that just aren't working societally and with our day to day values too.
Wow, there's just so much in there. So,
Mhm.
I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek, and
Mhm.
I see what he's doing. He talks about organization. He's speaking to leaders. His book
Yeah.
is "Leaders Eat Last," and
Yeah.
ins- he's trying to inspire that change in an organizational workplace. And the simplest way that I can put it is that where we generally care about the people who work in there. I
Mhm.
have been part of organizations where you inevitably felt like a cog in that giant system.
Yeah.
So Simon is out there doing his own thing, but when I speak to people, I say, don't wait for that. Right? don't wait for the organization to make it right for you.
Yes.
You gotta take control of your own life.
Yes.
Tell me about that. Tell me where that person that you're describing, and what I loved about that burnout, yeah, we see it as 0 or 1. Like we all know that story of the person who burned out, but
Mhm.
you could be in the process. You could be burning out right now.
Yes.
Where does it start? What's the first message? Is the first step even getting awareness of that? That, oh, am I in this state? Is that where you start? Tell me a bit
Yes.
about that.
Yes. So you're on the right track there. The first step is realization. If someone doesn't know they're burnt out, which is very common, sometimes people are just going through day-to-day life like one day after the other and not even realizing they're in a state of burnout. And when you don't have the awareness of it, you can't do much about it. So the first step is realization that burnout is happening and being able to recognize it for yourself. So being able to
Mm,
recognize the symptoms of burnout, but this can vary from person to person. It can look different in each person. And I'm a big fan of Simon's work too. And part of his message is though being in touch with a sense of meaning and purpose. His
indeed.
first book is like start with why, but
Yeah.
knowing your why of like not just why you're working, but like why are we alive?
Exactly.
What's your
Yeah.
sense of meaning and purpose in your life, even beyond your work? Sometimes we can sort of put too much pressure on our work to fulfill our sense of meaning and purpose in life. And then when things start going wrong at work or not really working out, then that can create a disconnect from our sense of meaning and purpose. And when meaning and purpose is lost in our lives, when that disconnect happens, that can be very scary for people. And that can
Indeed.
lead to things like depression or anxiety or like feeling this sense of loss in life. But
Yeah.
I like what you said about, gaining a sense of control in this situation where, yeah, if a person is working for an organization and there are systemic issues that are contributing to burnout, there might not be a lot of things a person can do to change the system.
Mhm.
It takes many individuals to change a system, but what can one person do is we can look at places in our life where we do have control. And one of those places is self awareness, taking a breath and looking inside. And another place is taking responsibility for our own actions. But again, that realization piece of burnout is really important because we first, yeah, need to realize and be honest with ourselves with
Yeah.
what's going on so we can make some choices. But it's not always that easy to be honest with ourselves or to take an inventory of what's going on. Sometimes we can be just too close to the problem in our own minds. If it's like, that's the water you're swimming in, like from day to day, you might not be able to see it. So sometimes
Yeah.
it does take external support for someone to help point out what's going on, pointing out, how you might have changed. And this can be like a partner or your family. It can be a professional person like a therapist or
Hmm.
counselor also. But burnout can be an issue that necessitates support. And I run the Self-Care Institute, but knowing
Yeah.
that self-care doesn't mean you have to do that all by yourself.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Love that. So, of course, side note, folks. So, I think Ami is in the same bucket as well. We are, at least I like the label freedompreneur, but I always say that yeah, we're on our own, running our own businesses gives
Mhm.
us a lot of freedom, but being independent doesn't mean you actually have to do it alone. Yeah, find
Yes.
that community, find that support.
Yes.
So, I really resonated with something you said in there, something about taking responsibility of your actions,
Mhm.
because I know I have been in that state where I know that I'm not where I want to be, but I'm
Mhm.
blaming everybody and everything else. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh God, my boss doesn't care about me, da da da. That, and you can go far, right? You can blame
Yeah.
the society, you can blame the
Yeah.
corporate culture, you can blame the people around you, but there is some that is disempowering, right? I mean,
Yes.
how do we go from there to taking more accountability and empowering ourselves? What does that switch look like? What does that need?
Yeah, but first it can. it can be okay to allow yourself to go there just temporarily into like, into blaming other people. But then sometimes part of that is true. Like it might be your boss or the system that you're
Yeah.
working in, or these societal norms that just aren't working for you. So sometimes it can help to look externally to say, okay, there's some problems out here and let's pinpoint them and identify what they are. But what we can do with that is take that information and not just say it's everybody else's fault and I'm the
Yeah.
big victim here, but knowing that, well, you're making a choice to be in this situation to begin with, but sort of using the world as your mirror. So, say like you're having an issue with your boss, and this is really common, and not everyone's going to get along all the time. If there's
Hmm.
power struggles, this can be really common. But looking at what is it about your boss that's really bothering you and using that as a mirror to saying, okay, how might that be a reflection of me? And what is my responsibility in this relationship? How have I contributed to this dynamic? And what is my choice in this situation? I have
Yeah.
chosen to be here for some reason. And should you need to make a choice to do something different, to start to take a look at your options. But taking
Yeah.
responsibility, it can be difficult. It can
Hmm.
mean sitting yourself down and getting really honest with yourself and taking a look at what is a piece that you can own. And now I do work with a lot of people where their piece is actually very small, where there are a lot of people who have control over their own future, or they have to do a lot of caring for others, but it's never like 100% of
Hmm.
everyone else having control over your life. There is these small pieces we can start with, whether it's your own mindset or what you're thinking about yourself or assumptions you're making about your own feelings or other people's feelings. But starting with these small pieces of ownership over your life can
Love
be
it.
a good place to start. And, starting with your topic here of, like a morning routine, that can be in your control. What do you even do before you go to work or interact with your boss or whoever else? That can be something that's in your control that you can take ownership over.
Yeah, and hey, I mean, I kind of went through the same journey, and of
Mhm.
course, with the morning routine, I realized that man, if you take 10 seconds to
Yes.
do a bit of gratitude or affirmation or
Mhm.
something else, or if you can take 2 minutes,
Yeah.
that's still a step in the positive direction.
Yes.
But hey, I want to learn more about you and the Self Care Institute and how you help people. You said that, hey, self care doesn't mean you have to do it all by yourself. Tell me how you and the Self Care Institute, how you help people. Who do you help? Do you work generally with individuals? Do you work with organizations, a mix? And is that each like a different how you engage? Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I work with a mix of both, where I do support individuals. Like I have individual clients that I meet with who I'm helping them through burnout, helping them with their stress management, either recovering from burnout or preventing burnout, and then helping them establish sustainable self care. But I also work with organizations. It's a very big part of my work, either through consulting or I provide professional trainings for teams and organizations to teach them what is burnout, what is
Mhm.
stress, and what is self care, because these three terms can be very misunderstood. And my main goals in working with organizations is giving teams a language of self care to work with so they can more effectively talk about burnout and stress. Because when we have a language and we can talk about it, we can do
Mhm.
something about it. And then also giving them a language of self care so that a culture of self-care can be established in their organization. But I also help, teams work through specific pain points or stress points and look at specific stressors that they might be dealing with and seeing how they can also come up with a self-care plan as a team together. Self-care, again, doesn't have to be just each individual taking care of themselves, but it can happen in a group
Yeah.
setting too. But I founded the Self Care Institute in 2018, and, a lot of this came from my own experience and where I saw a very deep need was. And so I experienced burnout twice in my career. So I started
Oh
my career
boy.
as a board certified music therapist here in Southern California. I got board certified in 2006, and this was my dream career. Like,
Yeah.
when I found out about music therapy and I found I could be a musician and I could work in healthcare at the same time, like that is what I was meant to do. Like, I love music, and I loved having a job where I could bring my guitar to work and play music with people and use music as this vehicle to create change and help people. And I loved it. But I started my career working full time at a psychiatric hospital in Los Angeles. And I was on the trauma unit of this psychiatric hospital. So this was a very intense place to work. And, working full time on a trauma unit, like, it took its toll on me.
Mm,
And it was really surprising to me, but burnout snuck up on me. But it snuck up on me because I thought, I'm in my dream job. Like,
yeah.
I'm doing, and I loved my work and I loved the clients I was working with. But after only 2 years, I found myself very tired, where it was this level of fatigue that I hadn't experienced before, where, I'd work Monday through Friday and I'd spend the weekends recovering, then have to go back in again on Monday. And at the time, I was in like my late 20s, and I was like, just thinking, I had this nagging feeling of like, life isn't supposed to be this way. Like, I'm
Mm,
not supposed to be tired yet. But yet, I didn't recognize burnout because I thought burnout only happened to like older people who were like ready to retire and they're just burnt out because they worked for a
o-
long time.
yeah. Or if you hate your job every day,
Yeah.
right?
Or
Yeah.
people who hated their job. And I was neither of these things until I started talking to people at my workplace and started to realize, oh, this is what I'm experiencing. And so at that time, I was single, I didn't have a whole lot of responsibilities. My answer to burnout at that time was, I'm going to save up a bunch of money, quit my job, and travel. And that's what I
Mm,
did. So I saved up a bunch of money. I took 9 months off of work to recover and I traveled around. I spent a couple months in India. I went to Europe. I went back to Hawaii to see my family. And it helped me get to know myself again. And in getting to know myself, I realized part of my burnout was that I don't think I'm meant to be an employee.
mm,
don't think my personality is meant to go to work at the same place 40 hours a week. That was part of the problem. Because again, I did love my job and I love the clients, but it was the work structure that was
yeah.
really depleting me. So when I
Mm,
got back from all my traveling, I started my first business, and that was my music therapy private practice. And it was a much better fit for me. It gave me so much more freedom to be able to make my own schedule, choose where I want to work. But after starting my business, a couple years later, I experienced burnout again because I
right.
wasn't having the proper boundaries with myself. And so this time, instead of like running away and traveling, I decided to go back to school and I got my master's in music therapy. And I wrote my thesis at the time on burnout and self-care in the music therapy profession. And I learned that burnout was really common for music therapists because although like most of us love our job, we go into these very tender but intense emotional situations, and bringing music in can create this very intimate experience where you're sitting with people's feelings and struggles, and it's hard not to take that on. And
Mm,
music therapy can be a physical job too, of, singing and playing instruments and carrying instruments. And so after I wrote my thesis, I ended up self-publishing this as an ebook on my website, and it was a self-care guide for music therapists. And music therapists started buying my ebook, and a lot of my readers started contacting me though for more support. They needed more support than just reading a book, and so I
mm,
started taking on other music therapists as my clients. And then I realized, of course, it's not just music therapists who are experiencing burnout, but it's a lot of other types of therapists and almost all helping professionals. And so I started developing online courses to help other professionals deal with burnout and to provide some education on what burnout is and on stress management. And so this led me to founding the Self Care Institute because I had these courses I created and I
Mhm.
had slowly shifted my private practice from seeing my music therapy clients instead to helping other professionals. I realized I can actually help more people and more clients if I'm helping the helpers. If I'm helping them not burn out and they can do more better quality work,
Yeah.
then I'm actually fulfilling my purpose a little bit more. So I founded the Self Care Institute to have a home for sort of what already existed, the services I had, the online courses that I have and that are still there. And that expanded now into, yeah, serving organizations and teams and, yeah, working online and virtually. But, yeah, a lot of this was born out of my own experiences, but also seeing that there was a very big need for burnout prevention and burnout recovery. And yeah, luckily I'd started the Self Care Institute in 2018. So in 2020, when the pandemic hit, I was
Mhm.
already completely online. And so many people needed support that year all over the world. And I work,
Yeah.
yeah, internationally.
Yeah. Wow. What an incredible story. And of course, we use the line, we teach what we had to learn.
Yes.
And I was hesitant. I didn't know that part of his story. And I was
Mhm.
hesitant to kind of approach like, yeah, I mean, you help people with burnouts. Have you had a burnout? So thanks for sharing that. Thanks for being so open about it. I do want to get back to your story, but let's speak about organizational and individuals. For one, for organizations, how do you think it helps them? So I know organizations sometimes can be very one dimensional that, oh, we want profits, we want to hit our revenue numbers.
Mhm.
But maybe if they look at a more holistic approach, again, as
Yeah.
Simon Sinek talks about the infinite game, if
Yeah.
they look from that lens, what does doing programs like this, you talked about a cultural shift that they can
Yeah.
go through. What would that help them in maybe that long-term game? But maybe it also helps in the short term. I can imagine an organization doing really well if you do have um, key folks in your team burning out. So, what benefit do you think organizations get from starting on this journey with you and going through that cultural shift?
Yeah, so it is both. So it's the short term gains and long term gains. Now, the short term gains can be looking at like just resolving immediate stressors that are there in their either company culture or their day-to-day work. Like maybe there's just systems that aren't working, or there might be working relationships that are really tense, and immediately addressing those stressors to start problem solving. But what's interesting and something I bring to organizations is, yeah, I mean, ultimately, for a lot of companies, their main priority is revenue because they need to make sure they stay alive as a business. And
Yeah.
that's understandable. Now, we don't want to be like totally profit driven. Each person's health matters too. But what's interesting is that when we're working on burnout prevention and when we do work on the health of the employees, that can increase revenue because, for one thing, it can decrease turnover. And turnover for a company can be very expensive. If they
Mhm.
continually have employees leaving because of burnout or stress or having to take, extended periods of time off, that can lead to a decrease in revenue and it can be very expensive for them. And also, when a company does have a solid self care foundation, it can mean they are being more productive and making better decisions to more efficiently, sort of efficiently function as a company,
Mhm.
which can support their overall revenue. And so, you know, there are studies that have found that burnout is very costly for companies, that it actually does take a lot of money. And
Yeah.
so, looking at that finance piece is important because I mean, if a business revenue goes down and then they go out of business, then people won't have jobs. And so
Yeah.
we want to be able to make sure their job security is there because that can increase just the overall health of the organization. But we also want to look at the company culture and, making sure this is one that is healthy and can prioritize not just money and revenue, but the self-care or the care and compassion within the culture. But it's interesting. All that is interrelated. It's not like we
Mm,
don't separate revenue from health. And it's not like you have to choose one or the other, but knowing that each one does
that's
influence the other. And that
love
just because
that.
you're focusing on health doesn't mean we're ignoring the financial part here too, but they can both support one another. And but also, sometimes when a company or team is going through a financially hard time, that's very stressful on the people working there. So sometimes we do need to look at the financial health to relieve some of the stress within the company too. And so, yeah, we want to look at, just different scenarios of, what needs to be done, but we can look at immediate stressors and not
Hmm.
just problem solving the stressors, but how do we manage that stress that's happening in our bodies so that we can better function at work. But yeah, also going and prioritizing the long-term game of how can we sustain well-being, not and this means the well-being of the people, but also the well-being of the organization as a whole too.
All right, all right. Sorry, it cut out a bit, but uh, so let's switch to individuals. And what I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you was that is it some kind of a step-by-step program where it's like, yep, we're going to take you through these, or is it more very specific to the person and each one has their journey?
Yeah, it's more of that. So with individuals, each person has their journey because again, burnout can show up different for each person. And then when we're looking at occupational burnout, it's not just about a person's work, but we can't really separate work and life, but their own relationships might, be a factor here. A lot of people I work with when they're coming to me for support are going through some kind of transition. A lot of people are experiencing grief and burnout at the same time,
Mm,
or they have some kind of life change, like maybe they've just had a child or they're going through a divorce or like one of their parents have died or passed away, but going through change, but looking at we can't really separate life and work. And again, they're they're intertwined with each other. But I do work with a general sort of structure in mind. And
mm,
so I got my PhD in mind body medicine, and I wrote my dissertation on how a person goes from a state of burnout to a state of well being. And in my dissertation research, I came up with a theory of it's a four-phase theory of how people move from burnout to well being. And so in my individual work, I'm sort of walking people through that four-phase process. But the way someone walks through that process can look very different from person to person. But we're working with this general structure here of, first looking at how did this happen? And then that word again, realization, allowing them to realize what's happening, what does burnout look like for them, and what needs to change here. And then walking them through this transformation process. The way I like to approach burnout is that we're not trying to eliminate burnout or eliminate stress right away.
mm,
So, although we don't want to burn out, if it is happening though, we don't want to avoid it or push it away or ignore it or just like say, I got to get rid of this right away. Because usually burnout is happening for a reason. And burnout is often happening as like, I like to look at burnout as like, it's this messenger that's coming into our lives where the message that's being delivered is like something needs to change here. Something's not working. It's sort of like the experience of pain. Like we don't want to feel pain, but pain is very useful. Like if you're, walking around and you step on something sharp, like you want to know so that you're not going to do it again, or that you want to know if your foot is hurt that you can go tend to it so it doesn't get infected or something. Similar with burnout. It means that something's wrong and we need to do something about it. the burnout itself isn't actually here to hurt us. It's there as feedback. And we want to listen to the experience, not avoid it or push it away or run away from it, which is a really common thing to do because it's not comfortable. It's not something we want to experience. And sometimes the message that it's delivering is might be a hard one to listen to. It might be a change you don't want to make. But the longer we avoid it, the worse it gets. And even with like eliminating stress, that's not a goal we're working on. For one thing, stress has a function too, and our bodies know how to respond to stress. And eliminating stress would be very unrealistic too, you know. And, you know, stress can also help us grow and learn. And sometimes, you know, stressful experiences aren't all that bad. You know, we might be anxious because we're going out of our comfort zone or doing something big and exciting. And that might come with a certain amount of stress, and that can be okay in
Yeah.
life. And so we're not trying to like eliminate burnout and stress or like saying these are the bad guys or the enemies in the story. Instead, we want to bring it in, understand our own experiences, and then we want to transform it. So it's almost like this alchemy that's happening.
Yeah.
We're taking a look at the burnout and stress that's there, and we transform that into well being because the burnout and the stress will teach us what needs to change, and it'll teach us how to get to well-being and fulfillment in life. It's actually not trying to detract us from it, it's trying to push us there, but it's just happening in a difficult way.
Man, so that's so beautiful. And as I was listening to your story and I was thinking about my own, what I was thinking was that how many times where I have kind of tried to just focus on the symptoms. And
Yes.
the example that you said, I know where
Yeah.
I've done that, where I was just trying to like go away and yeah, so just focus on the symptoms, but you're talking about a deeper transformation
Yes.
and this understanding that yeah, if we transform ourselves, we can see that the stress and the burnout and all that that can serve us, that can be signals to help us get better, go on that path of self improvement. I'm just really curious if you can tell us a bit more about, you mentioned the four phases that that people go through. So I think what you said was that each person is going to have their own path, maybe their own timing. So it's not like, oh yeah, 1 month, one, right? But maybe generally they do go through those four phases. If you can tell us a bit more about that and that part of transformation.
Yes, yeah. So these four phases. So again, these are four phases of how does someone go from burnout to well-being. So this first phase though is the burnout phase where burnout is happening. And again, but looking at this happens for a reason. And so usually in this first phase, burnout is happening because there's some type of incongruence in someone's life. Either like maybe they're not a good fit for their job or their like beliefs and their actions are matching up in some way. But some type of incongruence can happen and some type of change might happen too that kind of might throw someone off balance, but it can create challenge to where someone is feeling burnt out and they're starting to feel this depletion of energy. And so this leads to the second phase, which is depletion that's happening. And so someone might go from feeling like tired, then to exhausted. And then depletion is where someone feels like they have nothing left to give and
Mhm.
getting to this place of almost like bottoming out of like, I can't give anymore. I can't go on in the way this is happening. And what often happens in the second phase of depletion is someone might feel this sense of like overwhelmed emptiness where they feel like life is just too much and not enough at the same time, where there's not enough energy, too much to do. And the depletion, again, happening for a reason. And this bottoming point can be a little bit scary, and it can sometimes for some people lead to a crisis point. I mean, I've worked with people who end up in the ER because they're dealing with these stress related symptoms where they're feeling like heart palpitations or they
Mhm.
just feel like something's really physically wrong. But that point is often the turning point for change because that leads to, again, this important word, realization, which is this third phase of realization and transformation, where the realization comes of no, something's not working here and something needs to change. And a lot of times what they realize is that they need help. And you know that and that's not a bad thing, but that they need to lean on their support systems. A lot of people I work with is they're the ones helping everyone else, and they're the givers and they're the caretakers, but they need to learn to receive a little bit more. And so it can often start there. But that realization point of realizing what needs to change, and then integrating some self care into their lives. And it can look like starting small. Like you said, even 10 seconds in the morning is better than 0 seconds. And that's a really good place to start. And then building up to 2 minutes, and then letting that inform your self care for the rest of the day. But that realization brings up what needs to be transformed, and that we can take all that and then integrate it. And that's stage 4, is the integration of these new life lessons in order to inform our decision making about how we're taking care of ourselves, how we're taking care of others, our decisions about our own professional lives and our own personal lives. But being able to integrate very important life lessons so that our self care can be supported, and that self care can then happen a little bit more naturally and efficiently too.
Love that. Hey, thanks so much for sharing that. What about tools that you use? Now, of course, you've mentioned music.
Mhm.
Is that part of it? Is that what you would recommend? Are there other tools that maybe you would advise your clients about? Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah. So music is one tool. Now, I think music is one tool in a general creative toolbox. So creativity itself can be one general tool. And for all of us, that can look can look different. For me as a musician and just a lover of music, music will be my go-to creative tool, whether it's, turning on a song that I like or playing a song on guitar. But there are so many different ways to be creative. It doesn't have to just happen with music. It can happen with, visual arts too. But also music, I mean, creativity can happen with technology, or the way we make decisions in our lives, or movement, or dance. But creativity is this very broad toolbox, but it can very much help us sort of think outside the box, because there are going to be our standard tools, self-care tools. I can talk about that too, of like, eating well and exercise and sleeping well. But what creativity can do is help us take a different viewpoint of our own lives, and it can give us a lot of different types of options for self-care. And creativity can be very personalized to each person too. That's what I really like about it. That creativity is not like, there's no like right or wrong, like
Yeah.
with eating, there might be healthy and unhealthy foods. With creativity, there's lots of flexibility there to make creative decisions. And then creativity itself is very good for our brain. So creativity can use different parts of our brain, and that can be really helpful for us into looking at how we're going to transform burnout. And with stress management, we want to take a creative thinking approach, because we want to be able to give ourselves lots of options there. But as far as having a self-care toolbox, each one of us, our own toolbox will look different, but yet there are some things we can all use. Like, for example, breathing is a tool that I like to
Mhm.
recommend to almost anyone. For one thing, breathing's always there, hopefully. We're
Yeah. Yeah.
always breathing, but we often don't take the time to think about it. We can easily take it for granted, and that's totally fine. But it's something that's free. It's not going to cost a bunch of money. It's not going to take a lot of time. And again, it's always there under our control. So at any time, we can make a choice to take a deep breath in, to
Love that.
slowly exhale. And now the physiological response that elicits in our body is amazing. That can calm down our nervous system, which can help us think clearer. And it's always a very good place to start. Now there are lots of different breathing techniques out there, but again, start small. Even just starting with one breath can be helpful. But there's this step before you take the breath, is that you need to remember that you can make the choice to breathe. And that's often the hardest part for each person, is like, oh, remembering, oh, yeah, I can take the breath. And, I encourage people to put reminders around, like a little post-it on your
Yeah.
computer, on your phone. You can put these reminders that can come up through the day, but knowing that breathing is always there. That's a really good tool. But a lot of these self-care tools are at our disposal all the time. And this can mean, moving our bodies, but yeah, getting to know ourselves to
Hmm.
know what kind of tools we do need. But I encourage people to have a wide range of tools that you can use on any given day, and having some be very simple, but also having some tools also be a little bit more complex too, that you
Yeah.
can use when you do
Yeah.
have more time.
Love that. And I liked what you said that, yeah, initially that can feel hard, just that you're just remembering that I need
Hmm.
to do it.
Hmm.
But I often kind of compare kind of the mindset journey or the internal or the self care journey with something along physical fitness because just it's so easy to understand. I
Yeah.
mean, you walk into the gym, yeah, first day, you're probably not going to lift 50 pounds.
Hmm.
Start at 5 and go from there. But having said that, I know that if I put myself where I was, and as you were telling that story, that the feeling of burning out, I really like that because burnt out, I think we can all recognize that. But where I was in my job and I wasn't sure if I was happy, like I liked some aspects of it, but
Hmm.
it was too much. And there was this emptiness. I'm in that state. And when you're in that state, if I heard you talk about, oh, go from burnout to well being, I would feel that I'm so deep in the hole. I wouldn't see that. I don't know how that's possible for me. What would be your message be for that person?
Yeah. My message actually in that point, it's often the breaking point of being in that hole, is first actually to stay in that hole as long as you need to,
Okay.
because that place has a very important message and lessons to be learned there. And that no, we don't need to go look right away to well-being. And we can, you can hold a hope in your heart that things are going to get better, but being very patient with yourself and the process, and know that, just because you're in a hole or at this like bottom point of rock bottom, know that sometimes at rock bottom, what you really need to do is just sit yourself down and take a break. You don't need to work on climbing out of a hole when you don't even have the energy to do it. But first, it's to sit in the darkness,
Oh, love
take
it.
a few breaths there, and to regain your strength and energy. And part of my work is sitting in that hole with people and
Yeah.
just talking things out and allowing them to regain some strength so that they can actually climb out of the hole when it's time to. And a lot of people will feel it too. They'll be sitting in that hole, they'll be at that rock bottom, they'll feel that unhappiness, but when we can find some even self-acceptance in that spot, that is really powerful, because if you can find self-acceptance in the darkness,
Yeah.
then we can start to see the light and where we want to go. And so, in my work, I'm never like trying to force people out of like even the harder parts in life. Sometimes it means sitting there and talking through things and not losing the lessons of
Yeah.
being there. And then, sometimes at rock bottom is a place to push off of too.
Yeah.
When the person has the strength to do it. But not forcing yourself before you're ready, but knowing that, because what we also don't want to do, and I've seen people do this too, is we also don't want to keep cycling through burnout where you burn out, then you get a little bit better, but then you just slide right back in. And
Yeah.
I've
And you're
seen,
probably just treating the symptoms. Yeah. You treat the
yes,
symptoms and then you're
yes.
back at it again.
That's exactly it, of
Yeah.
like just treating the symptoms, but not addressing those underlying causes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I get a lot of people coming to me like saying like, I'm so burnt out, should I quit my job? And usually my answer to that is, well, don't quit your job right away. You don't want to make a big life decision in a state of burnout. And what you don't want to do is just like, if you're quitting your job because you're burnt out, you're likely to just go get another job and burn out, just in a different situation.
Yeah.
And yeah, but being able to sit in a place, it can be very difficult to tolerate our own feelings and tolerate, you know, a state of unhappiness or feeling unease with yourself or with your life or with your work. But there can be very important messages there too. And then that's where the self care starts sometimes, is being patient with yourself and your feelings and having some grace for yourself in those darker moments.
Yeah. Hey, I'm feeling right now that I wish I had met you earlier because I remember being in that hole, and you know, we say this line that when you've dug yourself in a hole, throw away the shovel. But
Yeah.
I wasn't able to do that
Yeah.
because how I had dug myself in a hole was constantly doing more,
Mhm.
constantly feeling that I'm not doing enough,
Yeah.
and that's the approach that I was taking to dig myself out of it. I was like, yeah, what, just tell me what I need to do to get out of this, right?
Yes.
And it felt, and I loved what you said, that just sit there and hey, you can have
Yeah.
Ami holding a hand for that. So Ami, hey, I want to thank you so much. You have shared so much with us today. But for folks who are ready, I liked what you said, self-care, but don't have to do it alone. There is help. If they do want to work with you, if they want to find out more, what's the best place for them to go to?
Selfcareinstitute.com. So you can find me there. All my courses are there. You'll find information about my services, whether it's with individuals or organizations. I also have a free resource there. It's called Take a Moment. And this is a email I send out every Wednesday. So I intentionally send this email out called Take a Moment in the middle of the week as a self care reminder. And this has become a very popular resource. I have a lot of people who subscribe to share it with their friends and family. I have teachers and therapists who share it with their students and clients. But I include self care practices in there, sometimes like simple breathing techniques, but it's self care reminders and self care education. And I also provide education on burnout prevention and stress management in there too. But you'll find my Take a Moment sign up at selfcareinstitute.com. And yeah, more information about me there.
That's great. So, hey, folks, I know as you listen to this, you would have found a lot of resources, tips, guidance for you to help on the self care journey. But definitely go visit the website because, as Ami mentioned, there are a lot of resources for you there. Self care is not about doing it alone. Ami, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing all of your experiences, knowledge, and wisdom with us today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me, Avi. I really enjoyed this conversation.
All right, folks, take care.